More and more, we're discussing Spencer Rattler as a weird backup option, day two kind of guy. But is he actually a good option? Welcome to Locked On Vikings.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. My hashtag everydayers. I appreciate you all so very much. You guys make this thing go. If you are new here, maybe you're a prospective everydayer, you can find this show by searching out Locked On Vikings anywhere you find your favorite podcasts, whether that is anywhere where you listen to podcasts like the Sirius XM app. And you can also find, say, a live Timberwolves playoff game radio broadcast if you're like in the car or whatever. Just search out Timberwolves on Sirius XM or whatever. You can also find this show by searching it out on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. You'll find it right there. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, when the day has come, I figured I wanted to get this in. I wanted to get the Spencer Rattler thing done later in the process, but not like the week leading up to the draft, where we'll probably be sort of rehashing some of the bigger topics for people who are like just tapping in. But for those of you who have been with me for all of draft season, I've done all the quarterbacks here, and I kind of thought I would just do the big six and move on, but then Spencer Rattler started getting some hype. And so, all right, I guess I'll hop in and weigh in here. But the way we do things here is I'm not just going to tell you what your opinion of him should be. Like, I'm not going to be like, I've got him as the 96th prospect on the board and blah, blah. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'll try to tell you some of the traits, some of the things that I noticed as patterns with him, and then you can value that however you want, or we can sort of have a discussion from there. But the standard here for Rattler is going to be different than the standard for, say, Drake May, where Drake May, the vision for the Vikings if they draft Drake May is one where they give up a bunch of first-round picks. The vision for Spencer Rattler is one where they have, presumably, a better supporting cast. So you think about like the tractor truck thing, or the truck and the trailer thing. I think it's like a Bucky Brooks, Daniel Jeremiah thing, but I don't think that they got it, that they made it up. I think they got it from like a scout or something, but or like a coach or something. But it's the idea of, are you the person driving their success, or are you along for the ride? That kind of deal. And if you are a fourth round, third round, second round QB, Rattler's not a first round guy, right? I don't think anybody has him there. Then you don't have to be the driving force, right? Theoretically, the vision for the team can be, we draft a cool wide receiver at 23, and we get a defender, we get a good edge rusher or a D tackle or a corner or whatever at 11, and we've got our first round picks next year and all that. We didn't spend anything. We got this quarterback. Can he work within that structure? So the standard is different. But that doesn't mean that it's just automatically going to be fine, right? Like, he still does have to be able to successfully quarterback an offense without introducing a whole bunch of his own problems that have nothing to do with the guys around him, right? And we run into trouble here because South Carolina caused a lot of problems for him, and it wasn't particularly common, at least in the games that I got my hands on, it wasn't particularly common to see like a clean rep. It wasn't that easy to find, like, drop back, read it out, throw. And a lot of that falls on specifically the center. I don't know who South Carolina's center is, but I wouldn't mind if he got sent to Gitmo. That guy has ruined a lot of plays in the sample that I got my hands on, at least. Which, by the way, I get most of the tape I get is from Caddy's Cutups, which is a Patreon page. You can get, it's like $2 a month. You can get a huge library of college tapes. If you want to get in on this with me, $2 a month, not so bad. So we don't get a great example of what it looks like when everybody around him does their job, and can he just be the point guard and all that stuff. Like, we don't get a great sense for that, which is pretty unfortunate. So I'm going to give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt there. From what I see in the best shot you have to like psychoanalyze and try to figure out what he's thinking, what's going through his head, it doesn't seem like he's, struggling to look at the field. And he's like a pretty experienced quarterback, right? He's an older quarterback. And if you're unfamiliar with the story of Spencer Rattler, he was a 5-star quarterback, best in the biz. He was like the next Lincoln Riley guy after Kyler Murray, and was like a Heisman favorite at some point and then sort of fell apart and then went to South Carolina and he's reclaimed himself a little bit, but now he's like 5th year in college, right? So he's another one of these older prospects. So I don't have too much issue giving him the benefit of the doubt, both because I would imagine you learn a little bit in that experience and I'm okay with like kind of just jumping to that, but also because when he is dealing with these non-ideal situations, there's pressure, there's, wide receivers aren't separating and stuff. His eyes are downfield and it's pretty clear to see what he's looking for, what he's trying to wait till it uncovers and stuff. And he's like trying to find the proper things and whether or not they uncover is not really on him. So like you can kind of see at least there's a thought process and there's an active thought process. So I'll give him that. But it just makes things hard to see. And it really will highlight your skill as an evaluator of being able to separate a guy from his supporting cast without just making your opinion of the supporting cast into that, like the inverse of that, into your opinion of the quarterback. And I think we do that too often. And I've definitely been guilty of it in the past too, where you have a guy with a really bad supporting cast and you get higher on him than maybe you should be because you assume that some part of the struggles of this team have to be not his fault. And therefore maybe you get a better supporting cast in and I'll up my value of, my evaluation of him. And you like take that too far. And like, it's an easy trap to fall into, but being able to separate whose problem is whose, is a key part of being an evaluator and not really something you can do a proxy for. You can't really look at like the stats of an offense or the fact that he threw 4 touchdowns against Florida and then say, yeah, but a bunch of those were like dump offs that went for after catch touchdowns that were like big plays by the receivers. And it's like, you can't really get a sense for Spencer Rattler doing that without just kind of looking for traits and habits. So what are the key habits that he has? This is where we get a little bit more into the meat of Spencer Rattler and who he is as a passer. And then we can start to think about how that works in the world where he is the next guy for the Vikings. So that'll be next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn is not just a job board. They help you hire professionals that fit your business's needs in particular, and you can't find a database like this anywhere else. Even people who aren't actively searching for a job might be open to a new role, and you have access to those people as well. They will get shown your job on LinkedIn. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, and they're constantly finding ways to make the process easier, like tools that can help you write job listings and screening tools that can help you narrow down candidates. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks, Emil, for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Hey, guess what? Today is the day for the NFL mock draft. The Locked On NFL mock draft. All 32 of us Locked On hosts got together, trades open, negotiating, wheeling and dealing, and did a mock draft. I'll tell you what, I tried real hard to move up. I was very aggressive about it. I was working the phones that whole day. So see the result of that. The thing will debut today at 6 p.m. Central, 7 Eastern, on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel. You can also catch it on the Amazon Fire TV channels app, and that is free, by the way, if you have an Amazon Fire Smart TV. Moving on here. Okay, so with Rattler, like, look, the supporting cast stinks, and sometimes you just have to throw plays away, which sucks. Like, you just, instant sack. Guess that just happens. And sometimes you can, you check downfield. Well, yep, nope, none of the routes had even close to developed, and he was still at the top of his drop, and he was under pressure. All right, yep, that one we just kind of have to say nothing he could have done about that one and throw it out, right? Can't learn anything there. But I would say that when you see a guy under a lot of pressure, like the fact that a rep was pressured is not in and of itself a reason to throw that rep out. If it's an instant sack because your center fell down and threw up in his lap, then okay, we'll throw that one away. But just the fact that there is some pressure, and the definition of pressure is going to be a very debatable thing depending on what you're looking at, right? Next Gen Stats says, did a defender get within a yard of you? PFF says, did you get moved off your spot by pressure? And the PFF definition is particularly interesting here with Rattler in particular, because whether or not a guy moved you off of his spot or whether you moved yourself off of your spot is a pretty subjective thing, and it's going to be debatable in a lot of cases. PFF has their checks and balances to try to like normalize that as much as possible, but ultimately it's still going to be something you can argue. And I'll say with Rattler, this comes up a lot. I have criticized a couple of QBs in this class for being guys that I think are like, wow, one flash of color and you're running away and you're suddenly breaking your stance, you're breaking your launch point, you're breaking your pocket entirely even. But Rattler did it, I think, the most consistently often. And that is a massive concern to me. It's really bad how often he'll do this. And like he'll have like, it's frustrating. He'll have like 2 reps a game where he will like work it nicely, and keep his base wide and just sort of like a small adjustment and evade and then step in and throw. But more often he will just like first sign of trouble bails. And when I'm saying sign of trouble, I don't mean a guy is coming at you and he's got 2 or 3 steps and you're waiting for routes to develop and you have to buy time. I am talking there's a flash of color where the D-line got a little bit of leverage on the O-line and you're now running and bailing and abandoning your base. And the O-line actually ended up recovering fine and still had plenty of time to do so, but you already gave up on that block. That's what I'm talking about. There's a lot of throws falling away from a possible hit when it's probably right, as hard as it is to ask, it's probably right to step in and take that thing. And I think, I don't know, like the exposure to Rattler is really interesting because you're either like an avid college football watcher and you probably hate him because you saw his downfall at Oklahoma, or you're like me and you follow mostly the NFL and your exposure to Rattler is going to be like the content that you consume, whether it's this show or like Twitter clips or whatever. And if it's just Twitter clips, you see counter examples of this get posted a lot on Twitter. And it's always like the same couple plays because there is always going to be like one. So you can see the ability to do it, but it's like 1 out of every 15 times he does it. It's like, okay, I don't trust that. And I think ultimately, if you are blocking for Spencer Rattler, you kind of have to be perfect. The second you give up even a little leverage, that could be enough to move him off of his spot. And that's going to make a pretty bad O-line look even worse and get the narrative of, wow, catastrophic O-line. He must be completely, he just has to scramble all the time and he's always scraping and clawing and what a hero he is for the Gamecocks. And the thing is, I don't want to dismiss that too much because it is true. If I were to use one word to describe Rattler, it would be hooper. He's a hooper, man. When there is trouble, no matter whose fault that trouble is, he's running around, he's making plays, he's making stuff happen. And unfortunately, South Carolina's wide receivers didn't really engage in the scramble drill as quickly as you would like. They weren't looking back toward the QB. They were late to react to it. A lot of times, by the time they realized that Rattler was running, Rattler was already scrambling past the line of scrimmage, and now you're just a blocker. So you don't get a lot of opportunities to see that, like, okay, break the pocket, go find someone downfield, scramble drill thing. Like, that was one thing at Michigan that they all executed really, really well. So you got all these really sweet examples of J.J. McCarthy doing it. And like USC, of course, I mean, they're all over it because that's all Caleb Williams' game. But South Carolina, I guess the other USC, the lesser USC, sorry guys. Let's be honest. I don't like it either. Okay. I don't like the Trojans, but I gotta admit, but like at South Carolina, they just weren't on the same page with that at all. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity to showcase an ability to like get out the pocket, make a scramble drill throw on the run. If he's getting out the pocket, he's going to continue reading the route concept while on the run, which is a hard way to live, but nice to see that he can do it. And that's part of why I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt of like, okay, if he can like every once in a while read a route concept on the run, probably not going to have a ton of issues with that when he is in the pocket. It's just that we didn't get to see a lot of that because of the disasters going on in South Carolina. So I'll give him that benefit of the doubt. But if you are drafting Rattler, what you love about him is the hooping, is the improbability, hit that guy, face mask or higher pass in the back of the end zone while on the run because you got blitzed. And that's all sick, but I've kind of been saying it about a lot of these QBs all throughout this draft process. You can't make the whole plane out of it. That is not meat and potatoes, right? That is, that's dessert. So what is the meat and potatoes of Spencer Rattler? And I think that's where you run into some of the other issues, especially when it comes to projecting him into the NFL. What offense do you run with this guy is, I think, a difficult question. So that's what we'll try to do that part next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Monopoly Go, the mobile game version of the classic board game that you all loved to play as a kid so that you could bully that one guy in your friend group. That is, of course, the draw of Monopoly Go. It is a competitive game, and you can access hundreds of different like themed Monopoly boards. They have all those different kinds from like the moon or whatever. There's an NFL one that I used to have as a kid, that kind of thing. In crazy locations and building up all kinds of cities. But there's all kinds of other new twists too. You can do bank robberies. So get in on that. We love a little bit of crime in our Monopoly. You can, of course, smash your friends' landmarks with a wrecking ball, and of course, charge other players rent whenever they have the misfortune of landing on your property. So go get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go for free on the App Store and Google Play, and go cause problems on purpose. We all love to do it. All right, let's wrap up this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast talking about Spencer Rattler today, and can he be the guy for the Minnesota Vikings? There's a lot of other stuff that I haven't really gotten to yet, kind of talking about just the responses to pressure and trying to make sense of him in the context of a really messy South Carolina offense, which is really difficult to talk through. But let me rattle through a couple of the other things that I decided, or that I wrote down here. There's this like super sinister trap you can fall into with Rattler and you could do this with any quarterback, where you could like isolate a handful of like in rhythm throws, and you'd actually really like what you saw if you just get like 3-step drop, 5-step drop, top of drop, hitch, throw, right? And like when he has to buy time, but he's not under pressure, you can see him really bouncy on his feet. That's not a great habit. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but what you typically want is your cleats to be like either flat in the ground, or you want your weight up on your toes. And if you need to bounce a little bit just to kind of keep yourself in rhythm, that's fine. But he bounces pretty dramatically, and that is just gonna like, it wastes milliseconds, and you don't have milliseconds to waste when you're in an NFL, when you're in a pocket that is potentially collapsing on you, right? Because you have to wait for your toe to come down, or for your heel to come back down as you're bouncing before you can actually start the throw cycle and stepping in and all that stuff. It's a super, super minor thing, but worth pointing out. But it also is like the only thing, if you take away the plays where he like puts himself in a scramble drill or where he gets put in a scramble drill and it's not his fault, then you would get a lot of really good passes, a lot of really great, like, all right, step back, rhythm, throw, accuracy seems to be there when you isolate those, but it would also be a fairly reductive thing to do. And you probably don't want to fall into that trap. There are just too many brain fallout interception plays or dropped interception plays, which when we're evaluating the quarterback are functionally the same thing. And when I say brain fallout, I mean, that is, again, like a bad response to pressure. They're like panic heaves. They're like what I would do in Madden when I'm like about to get sacked. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll just throw the go ball and see if I can get a jump ball. And like, he'll just like heave those up. And sometimes like Xavier Leggett will come down with it. And that's really cool for him. And then sometimes it's just like, well, you just threw an interception to the safety. These are not a good idea, and it's not a good habit to be in. You can really tell a guy's habits and which habits are going to be difficult to break because they're the ones that come up when he's panicking, right? When he's got to think fast. What's the reflex? What's the go-to? He's very comfortable throwing up that heavy, stupid pass to a covered receiver. I hate it. I can't stand that. It's not quite the Mike Penix thing of like throwing up jump balls to Rome because Rome is Rome, like Rome Odunze is Rome Odunze. It's not quite that. Like that's a purposeful, strategic thing that you walk into the game very much intending to do because you have a player that's so much better than everybody else. And then you're just trying to like maximize it. No, this is just like, F it down there. He's down there somewhere kind of stuff. I don't think it has the, like it's brain fallout, right? I don't think it has the intentionality there. And it only pops up at like the scariest moments. So I'm getting this vibe, this read of a panicky quarterback, and you just don't want that. That's and it's so difficult to iron that out of him and get him calmed. If he is, 3 years older than most of the people on the field and he's still playing this sort of panicky brand of football, why am I ever going to believe that he's not going to do it at the NFL level? And for that reason, I just don't see him as a starter in the league. And sorry to burst everyone's bubble who's got a daydream about keeping picks 11 and 23 and then getting, I don't know, the next Dak Prescott, I guess, like 4th round guy. But I don't see him as a starter in the league. I see him. Here's the future I envision for Spencer Rattler. It's as a backup, as like somebody he'll end up somewhere like New York, like the Giants, or maybe even the Jets, like as a 4th round pick. Maybe or somewhere else where there's like an old quarterback or a quarterback who's kind of on his way out that maybe, all right, let's put him in. Maybe he'll be a competition type player after a couple of years or after a year or two after after Aaron Rodgers leaves the Jets or after, we get rid of Daniel Jones's contract, maybe he'll compete with whatever rookie we draft. That is the vision I see for him. And that's the kind of thing you take in like the 4th round. And then he'll have sometime down the line, he'll be a backup. The starter gets injured. He'll pop in the middle of the 2nd quarter and he'll just like hoop like crazy. He'll be the story of the week and it'll be this really cool thing. And he'll have this like backup arc for that. And everybody will love to see it. And everybody will be like, what a great story. And then he'll like carve out a few years of like backup QBing off of that. And that will be the thing that he's named for. But I don't really see a world where Spencer Rattler is coming to town and you get like scared of it. I just don't see the tools. I see the running and the scrambling that can be okay. I see a lot, like he is such a gamer. He's such a hooper. When he scrambles and finds stuff downfield or when he does run, he will lower his shoulder. He'll bowl somebody over. He's a bigger player. I see what people might like about him, but to be honest, I think people are just getting a little bit too attached to some 1st round picks that are going to be like maybe like 2nd tier starters on your team. Like pick 23 is not going to change the franchise. Neither will Spencer Rattler. You're getting a whole bunch of guys that aren't going to change the fortune of this franchise. If you go with this, and I just don't really see the vision there. I think he fits better in a place where he doesn't have to be the guy that is supposed to lead this thing. Even if you put him, as the starting QB on a really good team, I still see like a really good offensive line still going to lose reps sometimes. And somebody like Christian Darrisaw, who lives and thrives in recovery, in, being able to quickly recover after giving up some leverage, that doesn't matter anymore. If your quarterback's going to move off his spot at the first flash of color, right? Like, you can't do that. And this is the biggest problem I have with Drake May too. I don't think it's quite as pronounced with Drake May, and Drake May's eyes don't drop nearly as quickly. But it's like that's still a concern, right? But with Rattler, it's so pronounced and it's so instantaneous, and he's so willing to move off of his spot and ruin plays that didn't have to be ruined. You're just losing opportunities, and you're potentially losing really good reps from your O-line. O-line is a position of recovery. It is a position of, it is you play to the whistle in that one, right? You can be losing a rep and then ultimately win a rep at the end of it by just recovering or anchoring down or getting your hips flipped and moving that guy up past the QB. But the QB's got to work with you. And I don't see him really working with this O-line. And I don't see this O-line working back with him either. I kind of just don't want any part of it on my football team, if I'm being honest, after watching this offense. I'm just kind of like good on South Carolina players. So maybe the defense is better. Who knows? But that's where I'm at on Rattler. I know people maybe would have been more excited if I was like, hey, he's actually secretly like the dude. But I don't see it. I don't see him taking an NFL team under his wing and leading them to the promised land. I see if he does end up being a starter, I see it going down like it went down with like Desmond Ridder or like Kenny Pickett or any of those 2022 guys that just kind of fizzled out immediately. I just don't see the potential. So, all right, that'll do it for me for now. We'll maybe go back to D-line mode tomorrow and talk about some of the day 3 guys. And we're getting there. So we're going to start gearing up for the actual NFL draft next week. See y'all for all of that. And as always, Skol.